It was a bitter winter morning in New York. Snowflakes floated through the air like slow-moving dust in an old film reel. Outside the grand, aging post office in Manhattan, a woman stood in a long black coat. Her face was carved with the deep lines of years gone by, each wrinkle a silent record of love, loss, and waiting. Her name was Mary Ellen. She was 71 years old, but her eyes still carried the restless glimmer of a young woman holding on to a promise. She had been waiting for this day for 50 years. 50 years for a letter that had never come. 1969, the summer that changed everything. Mary was just 21 back then, living in a close-knit Bronx neighborhood where the smell of fresh bread and street corner jazz filled the air. She worked as a waitress at a small harbor cafe, the kind of place where the regulars knew your name, and where young sailors and soldiers stopped in for coffee before their journeys. That's where she met Jack Turner. He was a U.S. Army soldier, 24 years old, with sandy hair and a smile that seemed to calm every noise in the room. He was in New York for just a short leave before being shipped off to fight in Vietnam. They had 3 weeks together. That was all. In that short time, they made a world of their own, wandering through Central Park at night, sharing milkshakes in diners, and standing by the harbor watching the lights dance on the water. On Jack's last night, he came to her apartment door. In his hand was a small white envelope, creased from being carried around too long. "I'll send this when the time's right," he told her. She laughed. "Why not just give it to me now?" "Because," he said, "some things are meant to travel before they arrive." The next morning, he was gone. The letter that never arrived. Mary waited. Every day, she listened for the postman's footsteps. She checked the mailbox with a hopeful heart. But the envelope never came. Then, months later, the telegram arrived: "Missing in action, Jack Turner, Vietnam." No details. No body. No closure. Mary tried to move on. She married a kind man, had 2 children, and built a life. But deep down, there was always an unfinished sentence inside her, a space where Jack's letter should have been. 2019, a phone call from the past. 50 years later, the phone rang. On the other end was a retired postal worker from Albany. "Mrs. Ellen," the man said, "I think I've found something that belongs to you. It's an old letter. Very old." 2 days later, it arrived in her mailbox. The paper was yellowed, the ink slightly blurred. But the handwriting, that careful, familiar handwriting, was unmistakable. Mary Ellen, Bronx, New York. The postmark read, August 12, 1969. Somewhere along the way, it had been lost in the postal system, for half a century. The words she waited a lifetime for. That night, Mary sat alone at her kitchen table. Her hands trembled as she opened the brittle seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Mary, if you're reading this, then the world didn't stop me from getting back to you. I'm no good at saying things out loud, so I'm writing them here. I love you. I don't know what will happen next, but I know I want to come home and find you waiting. I've seen enough of the world to know what's rare, and you are one of those rare things. If anything happens to me, promise me you'll live your life. Don't wait forever. Always yours, Jack." Mary pressed the paper to her lips, her tears falling onto the faded ink. She had waited 50 years for these words, and they had finally reached her, long after the man who wrote them was gone. Letting go. The next morning, she walked back to the Manhattan post office and stood outside in the snow. She wasn't waiting anymore. She was saying goodbye. She thought of Jack's last request, "Don't wait forever." She realized she had, and yet, she felt no regret. The letter had come when it was meant to. Not to change the past, but to set her heart free. Mary tucked the envelope back into her coat and started walking. Snow fell in soft, quiet layers on the city, as if the world was gently covering 50 years of silence. For the first time in her life, she no longer felt like she was waiting for anything.